Today I'm going to share with you my 5 best pre-flop tips to crush cash games online. Let's get right to it. If you want to do well in online cash games where everyone plays decently well, you must focus on the fundamentals. And you're going to find that in general, the most important part of online cash game strategy is pre-flop strategy. If you make mistakes on a regular basis before the flop, if you do not play a sound pre-flop strategy, no amount of skill after the flop will make up for your losses because you will just be spewing little bits of equity to your opponents every single hand you are dealt. So you want to make sure you're playing good, strong, fundamentally sound strategy before the flop. In this video, you will learn which hands to raise when you are first in, how to approach 3-betting in general, and it is not to play the GTO strategy, believe it or not. Next, how to increase your aggression with 3-bets, when to fold hands like Ace-King and Pocket Jacks pre-flop so you don't get stacked, and a whole lot more. Tip number 1 is to play tight from early position and loose in late position. You're going to find that the vast majority of your overall win rate comes from the button and the cutoff when you are first to act, or in the low jack seat, or the high jack seat, or the small blind, or the big blind. You're not making much money at all in those positions, or even you're losing money from the blinds. So you're going to find that you are pretty much forced to play tightly from the early positions. Here we have the low jack raise first in range. This is when you are first to act if there are 6 players at the table. If there are more players at the table, you play even tighter. The hands in red are raising, the hands in blue are folding. Take a look at this. Pocket 5s and better raises, which means 4s, 3s, and 2s, just fold, right? All the ace-x suited raise, but notice ace-9 offsuit and worse, fold. Notice we have king-5 suited and better hands raising, but the weaker king-x suited are folding. Lots of suited Broadway hands are raising, but take a look at the offsuit Broadway hands. King-10 offsuit and queen-jack offsuit are mixing it up, and queen-10 and jack-10 offsuit just fold. They're not good enough. Take a look at all the suited connectors as well. Many players think all suited connectors are great, but 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 5-4 suited, 4-3 suited, all of these are just folding. Queen-9 suited, Jack-9 suited are folding. You may say, why in the world are we playing so tightly? Well, in online cash games, a rake comes out of every pot, and you have to account for that. Also, you have everybody yet to act after you who could easily wake up with a decently strong hand that has you crushed if you're playing ranges that are too wide. So in this scenario, you really should be playing roughly this low jack raise first in range. Anything else is spewing money. From the button, you get to play a whole lot more hands. Notice now, any hand that's suited with a queen gets to raise. Almost every ace-x offsuit gets to play. All the pairs get to play. Also, any 2 cards 9 or higher, even offsuit, get to play by raising. All these hands are raised. You do not want to open limp anything. Also notice lots of suited connectors, gappers, etc. are playing. And this is actually a spot where if the players in the blinds are overly tight, you can raise even wider. Now you may say, why not raise wider from the low jack if the players are a little bit too tight? You can raise a little bit wider, but a little bit wider over this already very tight range is not much wider at all. Maybe take all the hands that are mixing and raise those. Maybe add 8-7 suited and pocket 4s to your range. But you're really not able to add that many hands because you have to take your range against all of your opponent's random ranges, which will inevitably contain decently strong hands a large portion of the time. From the button, though, you have the benefit of always being in position, and you're against only 2 players yet to act. So if you know the players in the blinds fold too often or do not 3-bet, which means to re-raise often enough, that allows you to raise perhaps even wider than this already pretty wide range. So you could raise hands like 8-7 offsuit, 7-6 offsuit, king-5 offsuit, 8-5 suited, 6-4 suited, 4-3 suited. Don't get carried away. Don't raise 100% of hands unless you really are against the weakest, tightest nits ever. But you can get a little bit looser from the button if you feel inclined when everyone folds to you, if the blinds are too tight and cautious. Tip number 2 is to use optimal preflop raise sizes. So many players just click random buttons. Sometimes people automatically min raise. Sometimes they automatically raise to 4 big blinds. You're going to find that in general, the sizes I'm about to lay out for you are good, strong, fundamentally sound strategies. So a raise first in size from all the positions except for the big blind and the small blind. When they fold around to you, make it 2.5 big blinds. If there's an ante in play, maybe make it a little bit larger, like 2.75 or 3 big blinds, or even then you can stick to 2.5 big blinds. If they fold to you and you're in the small blind, you're going to want to raise larger to 3.5 big blinds because in general, you want to discourage the big blind from playing the pot because the big blind is going to have position on you, right? So if they fold you in the small blind, you're going to want to raise to something like 3.5 big blinds. If they fold to the small blind and the small blind limps and you're in the big blind, if you want to raise, you want to make it about 3 big blinds. Now, if your opponent in the small blind will always fold to a 4 big blind raise, maybe make it 4 big blinds with all your bluffs. If they'll always call a 2.5 big blind raise, maybe make it 2.5 big blinds with your value hands, right? So always consider what your opponent's doing correctly and then adjust logically. When it comes to 3-betting, if you are in position and want to 3-bet, you want to typically 3-bet to about 3.2 to 3.5 times the initial raise when you are in position. So if the cutoff raises to, let's say, 2.5 big blinds, and you're on the button and you want to re-raise, you should make it about 3.2 times that amount, which is about 8 big blinds. Good, strong sizing that does not give the initial raiser great odds to call, while also not risking too much such that you lose way more than is necessary when you do happen to be against a very strong hand and you get 4-bet. From out of position, because again, you want to discourage post-flop action from out of position, you're going to want to make it 4 to 5 times, depending on your opponent's raise size. As your opponent raises larger, the multiple you re-raise to should typically be on the smaller side. As your opponent raises smaller, the multiple should typically be bigger to decrease their implied odds. For example, if the player, let's say on the button raises to 2 big blinds, you may want to make it 9 big blinds or 10 big blinds if you want to 3-bet from the small blind. But if they make it 4 big blinds, you may want to make it only 16 big blinds, so 4x multiple instead of a 5x multiple. When it comes to 4-betting, when you're in position, you're going to make it about 2.25 to 2.5 times your opponent's 3-bet size. From out of position, you're going to want to make it 2.5 to 2.75. So again, just a little bit larger from out of position. So say you raise the cutoff to 2.5 big blinds, the small blind 3-bets to 9 big blinds. If you want to 4-bet, you're going to want to make it something like 2.25 to 2.5 times their last bet. 2.25 times 18, times 9 is what? My brain's broken. 18, 9, 21, 22 big blinds or so. You want to make it about 22 big blinds in this situation. Okay? Let's go through a few more spots. What about when there are limpers? When there are limpers, you're going to want to use the raise first in size listed above, so 2.5 big blinds, plus 1 big blind for each limper in the pot. So if 2 limpers limp, that would be 2.5 plus 1, which equals 4.5 big blinds over 2 limpers. 3-betting after a raise and a call. Very similarly, you're going to want to make it 3 times the opponent's last bet plus 1 amount for each additional caller. So say the low jack makes it 2.5 big blinds, the button calls. If you're in the big blind and you want to squeeze, you're going to want to go about 4x, which was the 4-bet size from earlier. The 3-bet size from earlier, plus the 1x 2.5 big blind call, which is 5 times the initial raise, which would be 12.5 big blinds. I realize this math may be a little bit, it may seem like a lot to memorize, but I promise you it's not. And once you really, really focus on using these same sizes in all scenarios, it's going to become very, very natural to you. And that's one less thing you have to think about. And like I'm telling you, whenever I'm playing online cash games, I don't have to think about the raise sizes at all. I just roughly know what to do. And if you roughly know what to do every time and you're not spending your energy thinking, okay, what's 3 times the last bet, right? If you don't have to spend your time figuring this out and you just know what the amount is, that's going to allow you to focus on things that matter, like ranges and exploiting your opponents. So let's discuss tip number 3, which is to exploit opponents by 3-betting too much. In small stakes cash games, my number 1 pre-flop exploit is to 3-bet more than you're supposed to, than the GTO strategy recommends. And then overfold if your opponent 4-bets, because your opponents are going to raise normally, or maybe a little too loose, maybe a little too tight. But then when you apply aggression, they often fold too often, and they do not 4-bet anywhere near often enough. So when they do 4-bet, they're usually going to have a very strong range, which allows you to 3-bet wider than normal because you're often either going to win at pre-flop or see the flop, usually in position, if you're playing mostly from the button and the cutoff, right? And when they do 4-bet you, they have the nuts, so overfold. Let's take a look at 2 examples. Here we have 10-8 suited. The hijack raises to 2.5 big blinds. We are going to 3-bet. to $18. In this scenario, 9 big blinds. So they went 2.5. We're going 9. Over around to them. They call. Flop comes. Ace, jack, 6, 1 spade. They check. This is a spot where a lot of players chicken out and think, well, I probably could be beat because I have only 10 high. But this is a great spot to make a small continuation bet. This is going to be a very, very, very typical play for you that will crush your small stakes opponents, because if they have worse than a jack in this spot, they're just going to fold and give you the pot. And that is obviously excellent because you're risking only $12 on the flop to try to win 39. This is a great risk-reward ratio. Pre-flop, your opponent's going to typically overfold a little bit, or at least under 4-bet, and then on the flop, they're going to check and then play kind of straightforwardly, fearing you just have a good, strong hand, because when most people 3-bet, they typically have a good, strong hand. Let's take a look at another one. Cutoff raises to $5 at 1-2. We make it 18 with the 7s, which is fine. It's a spot where you certainly could call, but 3-bet's good too. You can mix it up in this scenario. And then the cutoff makes it 55 out of their $200 stack. Obviously, you would have preferred to see the flop with your pocket 7s, but you 3-bet a little bit too often pre-flop because you think your opponent's going to overfold a little bit too often pre-flop. Now that they 4-bet, especially using this somewhat big size, you have a really, really easy fold. Take your 7s, put them in the muck. You cannot set mine. You can't go all in as a bluff or anything like that. Simply get out of the way. Your pre-flop 3-bet failed, and that's okay. Every play you make is not going to work every single time. Tip number 4 is to stop getting stacked with pocket jacks and ace-king pre-flop. These hands are perfectly fine and good to play post-flop or to play for a small or medium amount pre-flop. But you're going to find in a lot of small stakes cash games, if all the money goes in before the flop, you're going to be shown aces, kings, or queens, or ace-king the vast majority of the time. And it turns out both jacks and ace-king don't fare so well against that range. So let's take a look at 2 game theory optimal ranges in the spot. Here we have the low jack, which is first to act 6-handed. This is what happens if you raise and then the big blind 3-bets. So you make it 2.5 big blinds. Maybe they make it 10 big blinds. In this spot, notice the hands in green are calling. Hands in red are opting to 4-bet, and the hands in blue are folding. The hands in gray you would have folded pre-flop. So notice aces and kings are happy to 4-bet. Then just a few bluffs like ace-x suited, like ace-4 suited, ace-8 suited, and a few king-x suited bluffs like king-10 suited. You're really not 4-betting much at all because you're in position. Being in position is very valuable. Notice we do have ace-king offsuit 4-betting, and if you do 4-bet the ace-king offsuit and your opponent wants to play out for all the money, you do have to put your money in. But that is not ideal in small stakes cash games because when your opponent 3-bets out of position, they're going to be stronger than normal in general. So if I wanted to adjust this strategy a little bit to exploit most people in this game, I would call all my ace-king suiteds. I'm sorry, all my ace-king offsuits and all my ace-king suiteds. Notice queens, by the way, does not 4-bet. Jacks does not 4-bet. These hands are not quite good enough to get it in if your opponent wants to do that in this situation. Call and see the flop. Get comfortable going to the flop, flopping a marginal overpair or maybe even an underpair, and playing a medium-sized pot. Let's take a look at a spot where ranges are going to be wider. Here we have button against a small blind, 3-bet. So you raise the button pretty wide, small blind 3-bets you. Notice again, pocket jacks does not 4-bet every single time. It's 4-betting maybe 40% of the time. 10s never 4-bets. This is a spot where so many players get a hand like pocket 9s and think, all right, they probably are bluffing or it's probably a flip. And sometimes it is, but when all the money goes in, you're going to be in very bad shape. Notice ace-king suited also does not 4-bet. Turns out being in position with ace-king suited is quite nice. In this spot, we do have ace-king offsuit 4-betting because it plays a little bit worse pre-flop. I'm sorry, a little bit worse post-flop, but it does fine enough if you decide to get it in pre-flop. But even then, if you told me you wanted to call some ace-king offsuits in this spot, I don't hate it. I'd probably 4-bet them, though. All this is to show, though, is that you really don't need to be 4-betting all that wide in cash games, especially when ranges should be on the tighter side in general, and most people do not 3-bet nearly often enough, especially from the blinds. Tip number 5 is to play 3-bet or fold from the hijack, cutoff, and small blind. And if there are more players at the table, often from the other positions earlier than the hijack as well. You're going to want to make a point to stop splashing around and calling from positions that are not guaranteed to be in position and or close the action. So you're going to find that when someone raises, the only spots you really want to have a calling range in are the button and the big blind. From the button, you're always going to be in position post-flop, and from the big blind, you know you're closing the action and you get to see the flop every single time. Notice if you face a raise from any position and you call the small blind, the big blind could then 3-bet and make you fold. That would be a disaster to put in 2.5 big blinds and then just have to fold and not even get to see the flop. If somebody raises the low jack seat and you call the hijack, first things first, everybody could 3-bet and ruin your day again. Or the button could call and then be in position against you, which is also not great. This is how you leak chips over and over and over and over again, and you will usually only end up winning the pot when you flop something decently strong. And that's kind of hard to do in No Limit Hold'em where you only get 2 cards. So you're going to want to make a point to focus on playing tight, aggressive strategies from these positions, which results in you playing a strong 3-bet or folding strategy. Let's say look at the game theory optimal strategy in this spot. Here, in this scenario, the cutoff is against a hijack raise first in. So the hijack, which is the position to the right of the cutoff, raises. And then here's what we do in the cutoff. In this situation, we are 3-betting or folding. Notice no hands in green. We are 3-betting 8s and better, ace-10 suited and better, a few other ace-x suiteds, king-jack suited and better, ace-queen offsuit and better, king-queen offsuit and better, queen-jack suited, and a few suited connectors. Everything else just folds. You may be shocked to see hands like Queen 10 suited, Jack 10 suited, 10-9 suited, Ace-Jack offsuit, all just folding in the cutoff against the hijack raise. But that's because the hijack should be raising a pretty strong range to begin with. And if you 3-bet, you have to worry about not just the hijack, but the big blind, small blind, and button yet to act who could easily wake up with a decently strong hand. Now, I will say that in most games, you should actually 3-bet wider than this, even though this is the game theory optimal strategy. Why is that? Well, that's because, again, when you 3-bet, most people do not respond adequately by 4-betting the GTO strategy. Most people either fold too often or call too often. And either way, if you're in position with a pretty strong range, even if it does contain weaker hands like ace-jack offsuit, pocket 9s, pocket 8s, queen 10 suited, jack 10 suited, all the ace-x suited, that's going to be fine for you because you're going to be able to continuation bet the flop and often pick up way more than your fair share of the post-flop pots. Or you're going to win it pre-flop and they just fold. So even though you should be 3-betting or folding, I would definitely 3-bet a little bit more. Don't get too carried away. Don't do it with like 10-7 suited and king-8 offsuit unless you know your opponent's especially weak. But if you wanted to raise, re-raise a decent amount wider, maybe even like king-9 suited, queen-9 suited, jack-9 suited, 10-8 suited, 9-8, 9-7 suited, etc., that's fine. Assuming they're not going to 4-bet too often. All right, next. Let's take a look at small blind versus a button raise first in. Now, we again have to be quite tight. Take a look. Hands like 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, ace-2 suited, ace-3 suited, ace-10 offsuit, king-jack offsuit. All these hands are just folding to the initial raise. We again have no calling range. If you're playing on a site that does not take rake out of each pot, or if there's an ante in play, you may want to consider having a bit of a calling range, especially with suited connected hands, some suited aces, some marginal Broadway hands, etc. Kind of like our GTO tournament charts show at pokercoaching.com. You can find those in the GTO tournament chart section or in the Poker Coaching app. That said, because most cash games online take a rake, I would typically just stick to 3-betting or folding. And again, you have to be pretty tight. Kind of like the previous scenario, if the player on the button will fold to your 3-bet a little bit too often, you can 3-bet a little bit wider. But don't get carried away because in this scenario, you are out of position. And from out of position, your opponent's kind of incentivized to call. Make sure you use the pre-flop re-raise size we discussed earlier to make sure that you do everything you can to incentivize your opponents to fold. So for example, let's go back here. Here we have it. In a scenario where your opponent raises to 2.5 big blinds, you're going to want to make it something like 10 to 12.5 big blinds from out of position. Okay? So if you're playing 2-5 no limit and your opponent makes it 10, you're going to want to make it 50 from out of position. That may seem like a lot, but that's going to result in your opponent folding a lot, and that's good for you. If you can win the pot pre-flop with a 3-bet when you're out of position, that is a success. So that's it for today. These are my 5 best tips to crush cash games online. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor before we leave. Click the like and subscribe button down below. I would greatly appreciate that. To recap, tip number 1 was to play tight in early position and loose in late position. Tip number 2 is to use optimal pre-flop sizes. Don't mess around just clicking random buttons. Tip number 3 is to exploit your opponents by 3-betting them too often and then 4-betting, and then folding when they 4-bet you. Tip number 4 is to stop getting stacked with jacks and ace king before the flop. And tip number 5 is to play 3-bet or fold from the hijack, cutoff, and small blind. If you do these 5 things, you're going to be well on your way to cash game success online. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.